Good morning, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. I am standing in the backyard of my Portland, Oregon permaculture garden here in Zone 8B. Behind me you can see our duck coop made out of pallet wood, and here you can see a Clematis montana, one of my favorite flowering plants, and it is built upon a trellis that forms the archway leading into our 3-paddock rotational poultry grazing system, which is also our orchard. And there is fencing here to partition the U-shaped orchard into 3 sections so that we can sustainably forage our poultry in those areas. Now, on the other side of the fence, the side that I'm standing on, that the poultry do not have regular access to, there is a guild here that I want to talk about. Now, guilds are the permaculture system of companion planting. I have loads of videos on my fruit tree guilds and nut tree guilds. But I recently made a video in which I discussed a guild that is formed around a shrub. Usually we think of guilds as having kind of this center anchor plant that must be a fruit or nut tree. And around it we plant all of the support plants that not only enhance the plant itself, the center plant, the keystone plant, so to speak, but also enhance our garden as a whole. Again, most of the time we're thinking about trees, but sometimes we can use shrubs. So we differentiate between shrubs and trees, and that shrubs are multi-stemmed or multi-trunked, but they can get very, very large. I'm going to struggle to get through this video without just sneezing up a storm, because as much as I wish that gardeners were exempt from allergies, mine are terrible. Okay. So a shrub can get very, very large, like this one behind me here. And this is the anchor, this is the focal point of this guild. Behind this shrub, which is a Goumi berry, Eleagnus multiflora, I do have a tree tucked back in here on the other side of the fence. That is a Cox's orange pippin apple tree, and it has its own separate guild. So the center point of this guild is really this shrub, this Goumi berry. Now, Eleagnus multiflora, the catalogs for it will tell you that it tops out at 6 feet or so. That has not been true for me. It is, well, you can see how high she is. It is a nitrogen fixing shrub, and that is why I use it in several places in my garden. It does produce edible fruit. I have a whole bunch of videos on Goumi berries. As a nitrogen fixing shrub, it is a plant that is increasing the fertility in my ground every time I prune it. When I prune it and I throw the vegetation on the ground, that releases nitrogen, not only from the clippings themselves, but when you prune a plant heavily, you get root dieback under the soil, again, releasing more nitrogen. So I've created a guild around this Goumi, and I want to show you around it because the video I recently made in which I featured an aronia berry guild was really popular, and I got lots of folks saying, oh, I haven't really thought about doing guilds centered around a shrub before. Could you show me more about what that looks like? So let me flip the camera around and I will show you. Again, we're looking at my Jude the Obscure rose, one of my favorite David Austin roses, not yet blooming. My Clematis montana. Panning over here is the Goumi. This is the center of this guild. It is the largest plant in this guild, and so I have to design around it. What can I tuck in and around this Goumi that is going to work well in this location, provide a benefit for me as the gardener, and a benefit potentially for the Goumi, although in this instance, because this is a nitrogen fixer, it's providing benefits for everything around it. And also, just works well aesthetically. So here in late spring, a lot of this guild is not yet flowering. I have a mix of perennials and annuals here, and my annuals are all self-sowing, so I do not plant them. I plant them once 10 or 15 years ago, and then I let them self-sow where they will within this guild. If they are coming up too much, if there's too large of a quantity of them, I just weed them out. So the Goumi berry itself is just about done flowering. You can see here these little kind of delicate lemon yellow blossoms with gold speckles on them are a favorite of bees and hummingbirds. Later in the year, this will be coated in red berries, which will make excellent feed for my chickens, one of their favorite treats. The shrub that is right next to it here is a black European currant. I do not know the name because this is a cutting I got on Craigslist about 10 years ago. So I don't actually know the name of this variety of black currant, but it's really lovely. It smells beautiful. You can see it's just set fruit. I have not bothered to net this particular black currant because I have so many of them in my garden. I get more currants than I know what to do with. I don't care if these get wormy. These will become snacks for my chickens later in the year. I've spoken about how I try to grow as much as I possibly can in terms of chicken feed. Fruit crops are a great way to grow summer chicken feed. These will be ripe in June. So as you walk down here to the chicken run, let me back up here. So the reason that I situated my black currant here in this guild is I've spoken in the past about how when you walk past a black currant, it emits a lovely aroma as you brush against the foliage. We are on the pathway down to the duck coop, so I'm frequently brushing by this plant and it just smells wonderful, and I get that fantastic aroma, and that kind of aromatic experience of the garden is really important to me. I love beautiful smelling things and a diversity of beautiful smelling things. Underneath this currant, I have kind of those herbaceous ground cover plants. Now, 13 years ago when I had hardly anything going in this garden, this was a potato bed. And every once in a while I get volunteer blue potatoes coming up here. And when I do, I let them do their thing, and sometimes I dig them up and I cook them and I feed them to the ducks, and sometimes I just let them continue as a ground cover. But the true ground cover underneath the volunteer potatoes are these violets. I love violets for ground cover. You can see how nicely they fill in. They're done blooming for the year, so they give me a really, really early bloom. These are purple violets. I can make jelly with them if I want to, with the flowers. But then a nice lush green ground cover here, shading the ground, conserving moisture, doing a wonderful job. Behind that, there are some cleavers that tend to volunteer back in here. That is Gallium aparine. Let me pick a little piece so you can see. Gallium aparine is native here. It's also called bread straw. It's very sticky, and I kind of let it come up where it wants to in the garden. It's very easy to pull up if it appears where you don't want it. It is a native plant. It does have medicinal benefits. For me, it's mostly in the form of chop and drop. I just pull it, it adds biomass, throw it back on the bed. Interspersed down here, I also have Columbine. I love Columbine. I have tons of them in the garden. Hummingbird food, bee food, lovely early flowering plant. When it's done flowering, you can cut it back. Use all of this as mulch on the bed, and it will flower again later in summer. Great low fuss perennial. Here I have Love in a Mist, not yet blooming. So the violets are done. The Love in a Mist is not yet blooming. It provides, again, that great infill ground cover. This is an annual, so self-sowing. I don't plant it. I never planted it. This is one of the few flowering plants that was here when I started this garden. This is not edible Nigella, so the seeds from this are not actually edible, but it's a wonderful flowering plant. And again, great ground cover. It doesn't need any watering, has a lovely blue flower. Very, very pretty. Any kind of flowering ground cover that can shade the ground and act like a living mulch, I definitely want that. That's a great role of a self-sowing flowering annual. Behind it, you can see going to seed, I have my French sorrel. That's a food crop. I have a whole video on growing French sorrel, and I do let it go to seed. The songbirds really love the seeds from it. The goldfinches especially, and the chickadees will come in and get the seeds from it. Now in permaculture, we're not only looking at the plants in our guild, we're looking at the fungal life as well. And underneath, I have my Stropharia rugosa annulata. Let me pick some here. This is the wine cap or garden giant mushroom. Perfectly edible, lovely mushroom that, as you may notice, this is growing in full sun. Unlike a lot of other edible gourmet mushrooms, Stropharia likes a sunny climate. And what I have found, I did not plant it here, has wandered here on its own from way up at the other end of my garden. It has slowly spread through that lovely mycelial mat around the garden anywhere I have wood chips. So I get a huge yield of Stropharia. I tend to dehydrate them and save them for soup. Great. And also you can marinate these and grill them. I think they have a kind of peanutty flavor. Great mushroom. When I harvest them, I cut the bottom off. You can see all that lovely mycelium, and I just throw it down into the wood chips. Keep the cycle going. The last plant I have in this guild is not really a vining layer plant, but it serves the purpose of a vining layer plant. And that is my Blackcap raspberry. My favorite berry by far in the garden is the Blackcap. I have a whole lot of videos on these. They tolerate quite a bit of shade, and so it's tucked up under here. I have found I get a better yield. They don't get sunburned, they don't get desiccated looking if they have good afternoon shade, which this Goumi berry happily provides. Thank you for watching today. I hope you got a little bit of inspiration about the possibilities for your guilds, both fruit trees and those shrubby, large shrubby plants in your garden. When you are designing for your permaculture guilds, please feel free to experiment. Feel free to put in a mix of annuals and perennials that suit your visual interests, your food needs, your medicinal needs, as well as the needs of the pollinators and the soil microbiome. It's okay to try things out and decide that they don't work. It's okay to shuffle things around. It's okay if all of your guilds look different and if your guilds don't look like somebody else's. Guilds, I think, are just such a wonderful way to express the aesthetic that you want in the garden, to express your creativity as a gardener, and they're very, very difficult to get wrong. Any of the beneficial plants you're going to put in are going to be helpful for your garden. Add that diversity. Feel like there is a lot of freedom to experiment with plants, not only with the main focal anchor of your guild being a tree or a shrub, but also flexibility to try all kinds of plants, whatever works for you, whatever meets the particular requirements of your planting location is going to do well, and it's going to make your garden beautiful and productive. I'll be back soon. I have so many videos coming out. I feel like there's more happening in the garden right now than I can possibly document or talk about. So I just have tons and tons coming out. I'm working on a book and I've not been able to get any typing done for 2 weeks because all I've been doing is making videos because I want to share with you all the permaculture design elements and the practical skills and the practical application of permaculture here in my garden, because it's been such a blessing and such a benefit for me, and I want to share that with all of you. I'll be back soon. Thanks.